I decided to let my parents stay in our house, Max said, and, with your lack of cooking skills, it's really inconvenient, he added. Then he had the nerve to tell me to leave. I couldn't believe it. He approached me smiling as if he'd done something great. I was so shocked that I didn't say anything at first, but then I quickly spoke up. I would never let my parents live here without asking you first, but you let your family stay without even asking me. My voice trembled with anger, and I added, and now you want to kick me out of my own house? Max's controlling behavior had been bothering me for a while, but now it was just too much. I couldn't keep living like this. He acted like he owned the house, even though he didn't contribute financially, and it was exhausting. I'm Lily, a woman in my 40s, and I work hard to support our family. Max stays home and does housework. I appreciate that, but his bossy attitude has become unbearable. His constant demands, like asking me to bring him snacks late at night, were starting to drive me crazy. When I refused, he'd remind me of his rights as a husband, which made me furious. His need to control and expect respect just because he's a man upset me. Dealing with his behavior on top of my tough job was just too much. I'm really tired, I finally told him, my voice barely a whisper. I can't keep living like this, I added, deciding to retreat to my room for some peace and quiet. But he wasn't happy about me walking away. He came after me, demanding an explanation. Why are you acting like this, Lily? You can't just walk away, he said, his anger clear as he tried to control me. Exhausted, I forced a smile and apologized, hoping he would understand. I'm just so tired, Max, please try to understand, I pleaded. Max just looked disappointed, and I didn't have the strength to argue. I apologized again and went to my room, feeling defeated by his controlling ways. Day after day, I put up with Max's demands, until one day I hit my breaking point. I felt awful, sick with stress, unable to get out of bed. I had to take a day off work because I was too weak to take care of myself. When I told Max, he just brushed it off, calling me dramatic and refusing to help. You're just making excuses, Lily, you can still get up and do your chores, he said, his words cutting deep. Alone, feverish, and in pain, I spent the night wishing for some relief. I hoped Max might bring me a cold cloth or say something kind, but nothing came. I was left alone in my misery, feeling completely isolated. Questions swirled in my mind. Why was I the only one suffering? What did I do to deserve this? The weight of everything, combined with Max's indifference, pushed me close to despair. I couldn't understand why things couldn't just get better between us. The pain of it all finally brought me to tears. When my fever broke after 3 days, I had to go back to work. My coworkers noticed how exhausted I looked. Are you okay, Lily? You don't look well, one of them asked. Their kindness was such a contrast to Max's attitude that I couldn't hold back my tears. It was clear to me that I couldn't keep living like this. A voice inside me shouted that I couldn't endure Max any longer. I knew I couldn't keep pushing myself like this, but I just didn't have the strength to face the situation or even think about life without him. I still cared for him, but the complexities of our life together made me feel trapped. Every day, I worked hard, only to come home and be controlled by Max's demands. It felt like I was slowly losing myself. Then, one day, as I was trying to relax in my room, Max called me. It had been a while since we had a serious conversation, and his strange excitement made me curious. Lily, we need to talk, he said, his voice full of energy. I sat down, ready for the conversation, and Max dropped a bombshell. I decided to let my parents move into our house, Max said, and, by the way, your inability to cook is really inconvenient, he added, his harsh words cutting deep. What hit me even harder was his plan to kick me out. I want to change the house's ownership to include my parents, divorce you, and start a new life, he said. These decisions are final, and there's nothing you can do about it. I was shocked and couldn't process what he was saying. A wave of dizziness took over me. Why can't we just live with your parents? I asked, my voice shaky. They've always wanted to be close to me again, Max said, as though he couldn't care less about my feelings. As the man of the house, it's my decision, Max said arrogantly, ignoring everything I was trying to say. I realized I couldn't stay in this relationship anymore. It had become unbearable. Max laughed dismissively. You're blinded by your love for me. All I want is to take care of my family, he said, almost playfully. I haven't loved you for a long time, I said quietly. I've already fallen out of love with you. All I feel now is astonishment at your selfishness and regret that I didn't end this sooner, I added. Max misunderstood, thinking that my hesitation meant I still loved him. If you leave, you'll be all alone. Are you sure about this? He asked, his voice wavering. To make myself clear, I said, I'm leaving, Max. He was completely shocked by my decision to divorce him and my willingness to leave. You won't make it without me, he said, trying to regain control. I've already fallen out of love with you, I repeated. Letting go of what's unnecessary feels freeing. My words hung in the air, and Max looked completely lost. I nodded and thanked him for everything, then walked away from our home. At my parents' house, I told them what had happened. At first, they were furious with Max, but when they saw I had a plan, they supported me. With their help, I began to heal. The first step was the divorce. After sending the papers, Max texted me with doubts about the situation. I explained my feelings, and then he went silent. A few days later, I received the finalized divorce papers from him. I filled out my part and submitted them to the county office. Now, Max and I were total strangers. I no longer had the responsibility of supporting our home. During the divorce, we divided our assets. Max took the house, which had been a burden to me, so I was happy to give it up. Instead, I asked for alimony. Since Max wasn't working, his parents were covering it, but he seemed to be looking for a job, likely planning to pay them back once he found stable work. But reality often has a way of messing with plans. A month after the divorce, I had settled into a new home and was enjoying a peaceful life. Then, I got a call from Max. I felt irritated but knew ignoring him might cause more trouble. I decided it was time to deal with him once and for all. Hello, what do you want after all this time? I answered the phone, my patience at its limit. His desperate plea for help barely reached me as I told him to get to the point. Please help me, he begged. His tone, desperate as it was, only made me laugh cynically. I expected Max to be struggling, but I was surprised at how bad things had gotten for him. Well, what happened? You need to tell me, or I won't know, I said, although I had a feeling about what was going on. Reluctantly, Max started to explain, stumbling over his words. I became the full owner of our house. I managed okay for a month, but now I'm having trouble paying the rent. Since I'm still unemployed, I thought my parents, who live on a pension, could help with the payment, but the bill was $1,800, and they can't afford it. They're furious and came to talk to me. Now I don't know what to do, so I'm reaching out to you. I'm desperate, he said, sounding defeated. Though frustration bubbled up inside me, I couldn't help but feel a bit of satisfaction seeing him face the consequences of his choices. He blamed me, complaining that I didn't warn him about the ground lease. I acknowledged my mistake but reminded him that his ignorance about the rent was his own fault. You treated me like an outsider and pushed me away, and now you're dealing with the consequences, I said firmly. Surprised by his bold call, I listened as he continued to plead for help, seeming unaware of my feelings. I need your help. We can't keep going like this. Ethan's voice had a sense of urgency, showing how desperate their situation had become. It was clear they were feeling trapped. I figured the rent was overdue, and they were probably already behind. I remembered the landowner's temper and the strict warnings about never being late on payments. Missing one could have serious consequences. Ethan, who knew the landowner well, understood all of this too. I don't have anyone else to turn to. You still care about me, right? Ethan's words were selfish, as if he expected me to help just because we were once married. I wanted to tell him that my feelings for him had completely faded, but I kept it to myself. Instead, I replied coldly, sorry, but do I have any obligation to help? You left me. Isn't it a little convenient that you're asking me for help now? Ethan tried to defend himself, begging for my understanding. Please, don't be so cold. I really can't do this without you. Whether you love me or not doesn't matter. We were married once. Can't you help me just this one time? He pleaded. No, I said firmly, my patience running out. It's been a long time since I stopped loving you. You left me, and even before that, I had already stopped caring. My words carried all the frustration and anger that had built up over time. When I said that, I could hear Ethan's sad voice on the other end of the phone. It hit me like a wave. For so long, I had endured everything, his selfishness, his mistreatment, his indifference when I was sick, all in an attempt to fix our marriage. I had worked hard to make it work, but this was the result. The question that haunted me was why I hadn't left sooner. Why I hadn't distanced myself when my love for him was gone. Regret mixed with the anger I felt toward him. Throughout our time together, Ethan never truly saw me, he never cared, never tried to protect me, and never considered us as a team. Every time he treated me like a servant or a source of money, he remained blind to my despair. And now, after everything, he had the nerve to ask me for help, acting like he was the victim. His selfishness was suffocating. Please help me, I'm begging you. What if we got married again? We could start fresh. I promise I'll never kick you out again, he said in desperation. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at his offer. Marry you again? Are you serious? All of this is your fault. I've been trying to connect with you for so long, trying to get you to face me. Now you want me to start over with you as if nothing happened? Do you want me to go back to those miserable days? That will never happen. I'm not going back to that life, no matter what, I exclaimed, my emotions overflowing. Tears mixed with my anger and sadness. Ethan stayed silent on the other end. I couldn't handle any more of the conversation. I simply said goodbye and hung up. After that, I blocked his number. Later, I heard from mutual friends that Ethan and his family had been evicted. He tried to convince my former in-laws to pay the rent for him, but they were furious and refused. They said, "This isn't what we agreed on." Ethan hadn't found a full-time job, so he was working part-time to get by. Apparently, his parents had to sell their house and now lived in a small, run-down apartment together. As for me, I focused on my work. My boss even mentioned a possible promotion. I might be the first female manager in the company, and my colleagues admired me. Sometimes, friends would ask, "Are you going to get married again?" To be honest, after everything I went through, I didn't have a good view of marriage. The idea of dating or marrying again didn't interest me, but life is long, and there's no need to rush. At my age, many people choose to stay single. What mattered most to me was living without regrets. If I could live true to myself, that was enough. With that in mind, I decided to continue living life on my own terms.